Hey guys, hope you're doing well. If you watched last week's video, you saw me tearing down my ultra low tech fishbowl aquascape. So in this video I'm going to be showing you the rescape for this fishbowl. I'm going to be keeping the setup ultra low tech again. That means there's going to be no fertilizers, no CO2, no filtration or even a heater. If you watch any of my old videos from this fishbowl aquascape, you saw I got some really good plant growth in the end from the setup. That previous setup taught me quite a lot on how to keep an ultra low tech setup. So my aim with this new aquascape is to use the things I learned from my previous aquascape and incorporate them into this new one. With that all being said, let's start the rescaping process. The first thing I'm going to be doing is adding the substrate. This is some tropical aqua soil that I previously used in my old aquascape. Because I'm using substrate from a previous setup, it contains a lot of beneficial bacteria which is really good to keep the water quality in check. This is the regular version of the tropical aqua soil, which means the granule size are a little bit bigger compared to the powdered size. The regular size version is a little bit cheaper compared to the powdered version. Next I'm going to be adding another layer of the tropical aqua soil, but this time I'm going to be using the powdered version. The powdered version has a much smaller granule size compared to the regular version. The granule size for the soil is about 1 to 2 mils, which is really good for plants with delicate root systems. I'm going to use a paintbrush to try and even out the substrate a little bit. The aim is to spread the substrate towards the back of the fishbowl. This will create a sloping effect from the front to the back of the fishbowl. By doing this, we can create a sense of depth in the aquascape. This will also help to make the aquascape look bigger than it actually is. This also makes the aquascape a little bit more interesting to look at. It's time to add the hardscape now. In this aquascape, I'm going to be using some river wood. This is the same wood I used in my previous fishbowl aquascape. I wanted to recycle the hardscape from my previous setup because I really like how the Bucephalandra was growing on it. Over the past year, the Bucephalandra has grown really well on the hardscape. I didn't want to tear it off and replant it on another piece of hardscape. I want to let the Bucephalandra grow on that hardscape a little bit longer just to see if we can get any more growth out of it. Also, by having the Bucephalandra already being established on the hardscape, it can help make the aquascape look a little bit more mature. This makes the aquascape more interesting to look at when it's first set up. Another piece of hardscape I'm going to be adding is some Riverstones. I had some of these stones left over from my Stiphodine Hillshrim aquarium. They are really underused as hardscape in aquascapes. Their colours and textures are really unique compared to most stones you can use for aquascapes. So I wanted to try and use them in this setup just to make it look a little bit more unique compared to my previous aquascape. The Riverstones that I'm using are about 20 to 30 mils in diameter. This makes them a medium sized stone. I'm just trying to place them around the riverwood to make it look as natural as I can. I don't have many of these Riverstones left, so I need to try and be a little bit creative to make a more natural kind of look. I spent about half an hour trying to make these Riverstones look natural against the riverwood. It just didn't work for this setup. Like I said earlier, I didn't have a lot of these left over. Maybe if I had a bigger selection of Riverstones I could have made it work. It's a shame, I really like these rocks and I would have liked to use them in this setup. But for now I'm going to take them out of the aquascape and try and find a different use for them later on. The first plant I'm going to be adding is some Limnophila sessiliflora. This is a really fast growing hardy stem plant. It's a really good choice for a low tech setup. It doesn't require high lighting or pressurized CO2. This makes it a really good plant for beginners who haven't kept plants before. I think this is a really good choice of plant for an ultra low tech setup. Like I mentioned earlier, in this setup there's going to be no CO2, no fertilizers, and there's not going to be a lot of flow either. I wanted a fast growing stem plant that wasn't too demanding, so I think having some Limnophila in the fishbowl would be the best choice. I wanted to use a fast growing stem plant in this setup for its ability to use up a lot of nutrients in the water column. During the first few weeks of a new setup, fresh substrate might start to leach out nutrients into the water column. The excess nutrients in the water column may cause algae to grow. The faster growing plant will outcompete the algae for nutrients. This will help to prevent any algae spikes. The next plant I'm going to be adding is some Cryptocoryne Lucens. This is a new type of crypt I haven't grown before. I never heard of this crypt until I went to aquarium gardens. The guys over there pointed out this crypt to me in some of their display aquariums. It grew quite low and close to the substrate, almost like Cryptocoryne parva. I've always wanted to see how crypts would grow in this kind of setup, so a small growing crypt like this Cryptocoryne Lucens should be perfect for a small fishbowl aquascape. One thing you need to watch out for when planting crypts into a new setup is that you might get crypt melt. Crypt melt is when the plant's immersed leaves die off. This allows the crypt to grow its submerged leaves so it can grow underwater. I decided to plant some more Limnophila at the back of the fishbowl. Since there's no water in the bowl at the moment, it's kind of hard to visualise what the plant's going to look like in the aquascape. I think for now the best option will be to plant as much Limnophila as I can in the fishbowl. I'm hoping this will create more of a bushy kind of look. I had some Bucephalandra left over from the previous aquascape, and I thought it would be a good idea to reuse it again in this scape. The Bucephalandra I'll be reusing is called Bucephalandra Lamandau Mini Red. It's a really interesting species of Bucephalandra to keep, but I haven't seen many people really using the aquascapes before. It has very small brown leaves that are almost reddish in colour. On the leaves you can also see small iridescent spots too. The leaves can look really amazing when the light hits it just right. Those iridescent spots on the leaves make the plant look like it's sparkling. So what I like to do with epiphyte plants like this Bucephalandra is to plant them in between gaps in the hardscape. Over time, as the plant starts to grow, their roots will attach to the hardscape naturally. You can also use gel based superglue to secure them to hardscape. But luckily how I positioned the hardscape, there was areas where I could just squeeze a plant into. One thing you need to do when planting epiphyte plants is to avoid placing their rhizome into the substrate. Covering the rhizome may damage a plant or even kill it. The foreground plant I've decided to use for this aquascape is Helanthium green. I've used this plant in my jungle aquascape aquarium. In that setup, the plant was growing really quickly. It only took a few months for the plant to fully carpet the whole tank. Once the plant has settled into its new setup, when it starts to grow, it starts to produce like a really grassy kind of look. This will make it a little bit easier to make that jungle kind of look. I think what I'm going to do for this setup is let the plants grow a little bit wild. By doing this, I should be able to create a densely planted fishbowl. This will make a really good habitat for all the baby guppy and shrimp we might get in the setup. The more cover there is in the fishbowl, the more chances the babies will live to be adults. I'm also hoping, since the Helanthium green is a fast growing plant, it will use up all the nutrients in the water column too. Overall, this can help to reduce any algae issues from occurring, but also by having more plants in this kind of setup, it will help to keep the water quality really good too. Something you need to watch out for when setting up a new aquascape is to make sure the plants don't dry out. Some plants can dry out quicker, like this Helanthium green, whereas other plants like the Bucephalandra doesn't. So from time to time, give the aquascape a good mist of water just to keep the plants nice and hydrated. Now that the plants have been rehydrated, it's time to plant some more Helanthium green. A little trick you can try if you want to get a really good carpet is to plant as densely as you can. The more dense you plant the carpet from the start, the quicker it will end up being a full carpet. Over time, as this Helanthium green grows, it will start to send out runners through the foreground of the aquascape. These runners produce miniature versions of the main plant. Over time, these miniature versions of the plant will start to root themselves naturally into the substrate. This process keeps on repeating and repeating, and then eventually you end up with a good carpet. This plant hasn't been too demanding and has been growing really well in my jungle aquascape aquarium, so I'm hoping in this kind of setup it will grow really well here too. It has been a relatively easy plant to grow. I've always thought this is the best carpeting plant for beginners. Since it's not demanding, it doesn't need any pressurized CO2 to grow. And I know a lot of people who are new to planted tanks try to avoid CO2 because it's quite a big thing. So in my opinion, I think this plant's a really good choice. So for now, I think we got the first stage of planting done. I'm just going to fill the bowl up with some water just to make the second stage of planting a little bit easier. You may notice I put a little bit of filter floss in the fishbowl. This will help stop all the plants and substrate from getting disrupted as I'm pouring the new water into the bowl. I'm trying to be really careful as I'm pouring the first bit of water into the fishbowl. I don't want to ruin all the work I put into this aquascape so far. It would be a real pain if all the plants start to get disrupted and start floating up to the top of the fishbowl. So the filter floss is a really good trick to reduce the force of the water going into the fishbowl. If you don't have a filter floss lying around, you could use some bubble wrap instead. It does the same thing. Whenever you're doing a water change or adding new water to your aquarium, always make sure it's dechlorinated. If you don't, your fish and shrimp may not survive, and also all the friendly bacteria in your aquarium may not survive either. It's a very important step in the fish keeping hobby. Also, because I've removed a lot of substrate from the previous setup, I decided to add some friendly bacteria into the new water I'm adding to the fishbowl. There'll still be some friendly bacteria left in the old substrate that we reused for this fishbowl, but I just want to give the whole setup a little bit of a top up. Hopefully this will just replenish all the lost bacteria. I'm just going to give the bowl a quick clean, just get rid of any water that's on the glass, and then you guys will be able to see better too. So here is the second stage of the planting process. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, I want to try and get a really good carpet of Helanthium green. So what I'm going to do is take the excess Helanthium green I got in my jungle aquascape aquarium and then replant it in this fishbowl. Luckily in that tank I got a really dense carpet of that plant. My plan is to try and thin out the carpet in my main jungle aquascape aquarium. I should be able to find some more runners that are easy to remove from the main carpet. Then I can replant them in this fishbowl to make a more dense carpet. This is kind of good timing as I really want to thin out that main carpet in that aquarium. Thinning a carpet is really important to keep the whole thing healthy and stop it from dying off. Here's kind of a mistake that kind of happened to me when I was setting up this aquascape. I originally didn't buy enough Limnophila for the bowl. Although this is a really fast growing plant, I wanted to have a densely planted aquarium from the start. In the end I had to go out and visit some of my local pet shops. Luckily one of the chain stores in the UK started to sell tropical plants recently. They sold tropical plants that were completely sealed in a plastic wrapping. Also the plants need to be grown in some sort of coconut fibres. In my opinion, I think this is a much better method compared to how plants used to be sold. In the past and even now, plants are usually just put into a random aquarium. Sometimes these aquariums end up being full of pests like snails. What ended up happening was that plant was contaminated with all the pests. So then when you go to plant those plants in your aquarium, the snails would just hitchhike their way into your tank, and it ends up being a super annoying problem to deal with. But yeah, luckily these ones that I brought from the pet shop didn't have any snails or pests, and I ended up picking up 2 more pots of Limnophila, which is great. I'm hoping these 2 pots will be enough to fill the rest of the fishbowl up. Like I mentioned earlier, I want to try and get this bowl as densely planted as I can. In the long run, this method of planting should work out really well for me. This Limnophila is going to act as a really good nutrient sponge for the fishbowl, and this will just help stop any algae issues from happening in the first few weeks. So now with most of the planting done, I think it's time to fill the bowl up to the top with water. I like to put a few rags around the base of the bowl just so it catches the water as it drips around the bottom. Here we go, I'm going to fill the bowl full of water now. Like before, I'm just trying to be really careful as I'm adding the water into the fishbowl. Instead of the filter floss, I'm using my hand to try and break the force of the water a little bit. Again, I'm just taking my time when doing this. It's not really a rush to finish the aquascape. We just got a few more stages to do before we're finished. I'm still not done with the planting yet. This is going to end up being the third stage of planting for this aquascape. I decided to use my second pot of Cryptocoryne Lucens. I felt like planting them near the Hardscape, near the roots of the wood, looked really good. So I think by planting more of this crypt in these areas, it'll help to make your aquascape look a bit more fuller. I'm really interested to see how this crypt's going to grow. I hope it grows nice and low towards the substrate. I'm going to use my last pot of Limnophila now. In total, I used about 4 pots of this plant. I thought I could save some money and get away with using 2 pots, but I think 4 was the best option in the end. You can see as I'm planting this last little bit of Limnophila towards the back of the fishbowl, it's starting to fill the whole scape out a little bit more. This is something I wanted to improve on from my previous aquascape. I really like the idea of having lots of plants at the back of the fishbowl reaching to the top of it. It's time for a quick clean up around the outside of the bowl. It was a little bit messy when I was filling the bowl up with water earlier. I spilled quite a lot of water over the cabinet, so I'm going to give it a quick clean to make it look a little bit more presentable. Here's the last little bit of water going in now. I just want to fill it up right to the top of the brim. There we have it, the fishbowl aquascape is now complete. The water might look a little bit cloudy right now. That's because we've got some particles just floating in the water column. If there was a filter in this setup, the filter would obviously filter the particles out, making the water look a lot clearer. But since we're not using a filter in this setup, if we give the bowl a few hours so the water settles down, it should be a lot clearer later on. But just before I show you the bowl after a few hours and the water settled down, I just want to add one more plant to the fishbowl. I'm going to be adding some Phyllanthus Fluitans. This plant's also known as the red root floater. At the moment you can see this plant's got bright green leaves instead of red ones. If the plant has all the requirements it needs and high lighting, the leaves of the plant will start to change colour. Over time they'll start to develop really dark, deep red leaves. It will look really amazing if the leaves turn red for me. You don't see red floating plants often, so I think by having this plant in the bowl it'll make the whole thing look even more interesting. So here's the bowl after a few hours. The water has now settled down really nicely, which has made the whole fishbowl look a lot clearer now. With the whole fishbowl looking a lot clearer now, I'm super happy with the results. Compared to my last fishbowl aquascape, this one looks a little bit more open, which is kind of nice having a jungle style aquascape. It almost looks like a jungle clearing, which gives the scape a little bit more personality, I think. Something I wish I could improve on though was a hardscape placement. I feel like it's a little bit too central in the aquascape. If the wood was placed further on the left or right hand side of the bowl, it might make the whole scape look a little bit more natural in my opinion. But other than that, I'm really happy with how this rescape's gone. This aquascape still has some similar characteristics from the previous one I had, so that makes it a really nice refreshing change to what I used to have. So I thought I'd give you guys a closer view of the fishbowl as I'm wrapping up this video. I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's watched this far. Hope some of you guys end up making your own fishbowl aquascape. It doesn't take much to set something like this up and it looks amazing too. If you want to set your own fishbowl aquascape up, I'll leave some Amazon affiliate links in the description below. Also, if you want to help me make more videos like this, you can become a member of the channel. You'll see the join button next to the subscribe button. If you don't mind pressing that button, that would be great too. There's also a link to my Patreon if you want to join that way too. I got one question to ask you guys. How often would you like to see updates from this fishbowl aquascape? Would you like to see an update video once a month or once every 2 months? Let me know in the comments below. And finally, I just want to say if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and if you want to see more videos from my channel, please subscribe.